Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us. It is Wednesday, April 1st, and I didn't realize it was April 1st through halfway through the day, but I'm not sure if any of you or all of you noticed. I understand that there was a April Fool's joke that made it all the way to the New York Times, the Extra Times, I guess is what it is, but there's a very official looking photograph of Lindsay, our infamous American Sign Language interpreter, next to our Governor Burgum in front of the podium, and it says North Dakota students will repeat current grade in 2021. So that made its way around the globe for a while this morning until everybody finally found out that it was April Fool's. So I'm glad that we got that out of the way, and I will not be fooling you with any of my updates this evening. So I want to start by congratulating everyone in the state, including all of the hardworking educational leaders from our districts, the hardworking team here at DPI, who is our famous Dale Wetzel says, put in Herculean efforts with 12 14-hour days for the last week, including weekends, to make sure that those plans got out on time. We had 171 plans that went out, public school district plans that went out, and 39 private schools or non-publics that were approved today. Some people had questions about why there were why we have 175 operating districts and only 171 plans went out. Because some of our schools are not operating. That would be the first explanation. We have, and two districts, Anamoose and Drake, submitted a single plan. They have separate school boards, but they have one superintendent and essentially operate as a single district. And also Hope Page also submitted a single plan. They have recently consolidated, but it won't become effective until next year, but they submitted one plan. So that's why we had 171 public school plans submitted and 39 private school plans submitted, and all approved with funding out the door today. So thank you very, very much. If you did not receive an official approval notice from me, please let me know, contacting Amanda Peterson at nd.gov if you didn't, and we'll get that official letter out to you today. I just also want to share with you that today was the first day of school for many of our school districts. Some of you have been at it for a week or more and have worked through some of the kinks and the bumps. I was on a radio show earlier today, and I acknowledge the fact that the implementation phase will actually be harder, just as it is, and I guess I'll use an analogy. Planning the wedding is hard. Living in a marriage is the work. And so that's what we're into right now, is the implementation of what our plans were. And there will be bumps. And I think it's okay that we acknowledge that. I think our students will expect that we acknowledge that. I know that our parents are experiencing some bumps. But if we can all acknowledge that we'll get through it together, I think we will all be better off for it. We're here at the Department of Public Instruction. We don't expect or think these things are going to be executed perfectly. So please, you've developed relationships with staff at the department. Please continue to lean on those relationships. Call on us to help you. At our morning huddle this morning, that's exactly what we as a team transitioned into at the Department of Public Instruction. With the plans approved and the implementation underway, we decided that we needed to go to our second priority mission, our second priority, second order decision, and make that our first priority. And so right now we've transitioned at DPI on working on the support and implementation, utilizing both public resources and all the private opportunities that have been coming in through your doors and through your inboxes, making sure that we're working on vetting those, sharing academic resources in a common space that EduTech has so diligently worked on putting together, the REAs, the list goes on and on, Center for Distance Education. There are so many fabulous sources and places that these resources are housed, yet as we began to think about how can we organize those into one place, no one really had the time to do that and operationalize that effort. So DPI is going to reach out to all of our partners as we do and see if we might be able to use this time to really take North Dakota to a new level where we can have a common source for our leaders, our teachers, our students, our families to go to make sure that that all of our creative ideas are being put to good use across the state. So please stay tuned for more information on that. Update on child nutrition. All schools have been contacted regarding serving meals during school closures and the agreements that need to be put in place, the policy statements, and distribution plans that have been requested. There are just a few schools left to submit these required recommendations, and they've been contacted, and we are working with them as well individually. A webinar was held today to discuss food service operations, and a copy of the PowerPoint and the Q&As are located on the Child Nutrition Summer Food Service Program webpage and will be posted on the Child Nutrition COVID-19 page soon. I received a message from a related message through the governor's office today from an interested constituent and voter, and she just had, he or she, I don't know, it was an anonymous suggestion. They just had one suggestion that I thought I would pass on with you today regarding picking up meals. They thought in this arena of social distancing, if the curbside pickup could be set up in a manner that the passenger side window could be the one that would be accessing or closest to the food distribution person, that it might help even more with the social distancing, with the extra distance between having the breakfast, the sack breakfast or lunch being passed through the passenger side, and I promised that I would share that with all of our listeners and all of those on the update today. So thank you for that, just an idea. Special education. Yesterday, March 31st, the Executive Director of CASE sent a joint sign-on letter to the National Association of the State Directors of Special Education. That would be the association that Jerry Tevens belongs to. They sent this letter to the Acting Assistant Secretary Mark Schultz and Director Vander Plug to the Office of Special Education and Rehabilitative Services. This letter is requesting additional consideration for flexibility under IDEA. This letter was in response to Congress's request that the U.S. Secretary of Education, Betsy DeVos, provide a list of recommended waivers on educational laws. They are asking them to provide temporary relief during this unprecedented epidemic. The three areas that the Association of State Directors of Special Education and the CASE sent in the ask for flexibility are timelines. They wanted a 60-day evaluation timeline and reevaluation, flexibility in the annual IEP review timelines, flexibility in the complaint timelines, and flexibility in the Part C to Part B transition timelines. NASDSE will also begin to survey the members very soon on their thoughts for necessary funding requests, and we'll talk more about funding requests in a bit, to Congress that might help provide financial relief to state and localities. The other area that this joint letter requested was flexibility and procedural areas. Procedural flexibilities that they were asking for were documentation of FAPE, data collection and corrective action plans, fiscal management flexibilities, and maintenance of effort. So that's the update on the special education. I also want to provide an update that Assistant Superintendent Lori Matzke put together based on several webinars and informational meetings that she's attended both with CCSSO and the U.S. Department of Ed. And this Q&A will be posted, obviously, to our website, but it's regarding the COVID-19 supplemental funding for education. So the first question, within the recently passed CARES Act, is there funding for education? Unequivocally, yes. The CARES Act provided $13.5 billion for elementary and secondary education. How much funding will North Dakota receive? In response to interest in state grants, the Congressional Research Service prepared estimated state allocations. This is based on Title I funding formula. And at this point in time, North Dakota's estimated, I'm underscoring, estimated allocation is $33 million. How will these funds be distributed? The funding formula for federal to state educational agencies and then state education agency, which is DPI in North Dakota, to our LEAs, which are school district, will all use the Title I funding formula. How can districts use these funds? The U.S. Education Department has informed DPI that they intend to release an application within the next few weeks for us to apply for these funds. DPI is simultaneously working on an application and guidance and will disseminate these applications and information to our LEAs, to our school districts later this month. Will all districts receive funding? DPI is required to use the Title I funding formula to distribute these funds. Therefore, districts ineligible for Title I funding would not receive a grant. DPI is researching other sources of funding to assist the relatively small number of districts ineligible for this supplemental grant. So as I mentioned yesterday, we are working on a solution for this. How can our district apply for these funds? DPI is working to create an application and guidance so districts can apply directly to DPI for funding. DPI must first apply and receive approval from USED for these dollars. And as I mentioned yesterday, before we could even apply, we need to go to the Emergency Commission tomorrow. It's a emergency commission, a legislative emergency commission that is being held via Teams, being held tomorrow. If anyone wants to come to the Capitol, they will be setting up in the Pioneer Room. How long does our district have to spend these funds? So this is emergency supplemental funding. It's a relief package that is meant to provide immediate relief to school districts. Initially, we had thought that the funds must be spent by December 31st, 2020. We heard some information today that indicates that the funds must be spent by September 30, 2020, which gives us an even shorter turnaround time to get this done. But CCSSO will be working on this and advocating to extend that deadline. Please contact Lori Matzke. If the answers on our website aren't answering your questions, please contact Lori for any additional information on this. I want to share just a few more things with you before we leave today. As we've all moved to online, or a large portion of us have moved to online and virtual learning, I really want to remind everyone of the FERPA requirements that all of us are bound by. North Dakota K-12 schools, you have developed amazingly creative plans to educate our state students during the COVID situation. These plans have included oftentimes technology tools to support our students, parents, and teachers. And we just want to remind everyone to be vigilant about security and data privacy. There was a constant contact that went out today that provided some direct links and some reminders of the FERPA and virtual learning. But I just really want to ensure that everyone be sure that whatever tools that are used by your school districts or your students, that they adhere to FERPA guidelines to protect both educational data and personal data. This really does frequently disqualify many consumer products that most of us are used to using, especially free-to-use services that often perform that data mining for advertisement purposes. Also, the COPA, Children's Online Privacy Protection Act, places requirements for collection of personal information from or about children under 13 years of age. So this causes many companies, such as Facebook, to decline and provide services to that age group. So again, COPA makes anyone under the age of 13 ineligible to use many of those services. We encourage you all to be especially careful to avoid scams during these times as well. Many of these scams provide assistance or are masquerading as legitimate technology companies. We've also become aware today of an incredible increase in fake Zoom and Google domains and downloads, In fact, one of our state agencies was conducting a Zoom meeting today, and they underwent which was called a Zoom bombing. And so this is really an opportune time for bad actors to rear their ugly heads. So just want to make sure everyone is understanding of that, is aware of that, and keeping our students, our families, and our systems safe during this time. Home networks are another concern with families working, living, and learning on their home networks simultaneously. So there's lots of companies out there that may be offering to provide an increase of broadband access to the internet. And it's very realistic to understand that many parents and families might find this intriguing or inviting at this time, especially when these video conferences are going on. But just asking everyone to be vigilant against this as we try to transform the way that our students are learning. Finally, I had a question that came in after the governor's press conference today, and I think it addresses something that can't be said often enough. It said, during the governor's press conference today, he indicated that the closure for restaurants, liquor establishments, and other business that had received an executive order to be closed until April 6th will now have an extended closure until April 20. This person writes, as I understood Governor Burgum's original order to close all schools, he indicated or certainly implied that it was at least until April 1st, which is today. It would be very helpful if we had an idea of what indefinite closure for schools means, other than 2 weeks, another month, 2 months, or so school districts can begin planning for some events like proms, graduation, normal summer custodial projects, etc. So I'll tell you that the governor's executive order indicated that all school buildings, all access to school buildings, with the exception of essential staff as determined by local school districts, all school buildings would be closed at least until April 1st. Or excuse me, now I'm confusing everyone. All school buildings will remain closed until further notice. So until further notice, all buildings are closed. The mention of the April 1st date was the governor's declaration in his executive order that all learning must occur and begin again no later than April 1st in order for student foundation aid to be kept whole. So April 1st was the beginning, the absolute latest date that the beginning of instruction must begin for our K-12 students. But all buildings will remain closed until further notice. I know that until further notice is kind of an arbitrary, ambiguous term, and the governor in his Saturday press conference was asked that question, what does until further notice mean? And although not in formal order, the governor's answer to that question during that press conference was, he will not even entertain the opening of buildings until he sees the decline in the number of confirmed cases of COVID, of daily confirmed cases of COVID positive tests begin to decline for a number of days. So I would say that if anyone is wondering when buildings may be opened up again, the governor's indication and his litmus test is going to be when the positive results for COVID tests begin to decrease and remain low for a significant amount of time. At this point, the COVID confirmed cases are not decreasing, they are increasing, and so the governor is not entertaining the opening of school buildings at this time. So I hope that removes some of the ambiguity, some of the uncertainty of what until further notice means. I would also just remind everyone that President Trump had ordered social distancing extended for the nation until April 30. So for those looking for some sort of long-term planning, I would just use the governor's statement from his Saturday press conference and the president's declaration of social distancing deadline or extension till April 30. So I will end on where we began. Thank you to all of our school districts. Thank you to all of our teachers, our support staff, our bus drivers, our lunchroom people continuing to serve those school lunches. Thank you to our school leaders leading incredible teams out there. And thank you, on a personal note, to my DPI staff that did yeoman's work over the last 14 days. I appreciate it. Have a good night, and we'll talk tomorrow.